Hi, everybody. Welcome to a special Paddock Pass podcast episode from the dark, cold, horrible depths of Milan, somewhat unexpectedly for the 2026 Aprilia Racing MotoGP launch. As people watching on YouTube might be able to tell, we are at the launch and we're sort of flanked by this huge Aprilia banner around us. It might be a little bit noisy as well because we're in the catering area, so that's why Neil's looking quite satisfied.
Well, he's looking unhappy now because they've taken all the food away.
Yeah, but then this is an area where he's kind of already excelled. So we're asking him to perform again.
Yeah, he's given his 110% of the buffet.
Yes, Adam, Neil, David, as always, we're just going to give you our takeaways from this launch event, featuring, of course, Marco Bezzecchi, third in the world in MotoGP. Aprilia, also their best ever season in 2025, as well as Jorge Martin and what's going to happen in the next chapter of the Spaniard's career after a very disappointing championship defense in 2025 due to various factors. First of all, how are we all? Are we well fed? We've been here for a night. And obviously, it's been busy pretty much through the morning and the afternoon as things have been going on. And I'm sure Dave MotoGP fans have seen, the 2026 RSGP, the livery, the reintroduction of the lion logo for the factory.
I like it. I like it. I like the lion. Yeah, I do like the lion. Again, we'll talk about this later, but the lack of a title sponsor is a big factor. That continues to be an issue in MotoGP. But yeah, I mean, apart from that, the bike looks very similar. I like the bringing back the line, big sort of 250. I'm sure Neil will feel the same way, big 250 vibes. And yeah, it was quite interesting.
That's it. No cynicism, no sarcasm.
No, it's the start of the season. You have to wait till at least round 2 before the cynicism starts.
Hey, Neil, who is this man? He actually joined us last night for a beer, and when we were watching the football, I just don't.
Yeah, and I was
full of beans. He wasn't even cursing us for choosing a location which he normally wouldn't adhere to.
Yeah, I refrained from. There were multiple football matches going on all around me, and I refrained from saying making too negative comments about it.
At least Neil and I had already had dinner and tiramisu, so you didn't have that kind of sort of lingering prospect to worry about. We weren't shoveling any postres or dessert in your face, let's say. So there we are. First of all, let's get straight into this. The Aprilia team launch. Marco Bezzecchi, Neil, he was refreshed, full of energy. He actually said he was happy to see the press, which I doubted. And then
laughing.
you two very sycophantically were saying, "Oh, it's so nice to see you again, Marco," which confused me somewhat. But then, like Dave said, it's the start of the year, so I guess we can all be excused for the over enthusiasm. But I mean, he looks good. Bezzecchi, he's in shape. The stuff he's saying is full of confidence, and you can see the effects of a decent year compared to this time 12 months ago.
Yeah, we were just doing our job, something I noted that you weren't very keen on doing. You were asking everyone a question in the press conferences that followed the presentation, except in the Bezzecchi one, which I didn't really seem to fathom.
Didn't have any stories. Nothing came to mind.
Yeah. I mean, there's... they said in the presentation what they had: 19 podiums last year, Aprilia, 4 race wins in MotoGP, 3 sprint wins, I think 3rd in the MotoGP Championship for the first ever time. But they are not really content on that, and they're still trying to push forward. But everyone was very cagey about actually saying we're going to be fighting for the championship this year. I think they were falling just a little bit short of that, trying to temper expectations somewhat. I think Bezzecchi said, let's just get to Sepang and not be thinking about being in the title fight of Valencia. That would not be the kind of the correct way to approach it. He does seem very calm and carries that sort of quiet confidence that you see with riders when they're in a very good moment. And I mean, it's really difficult to kind of draw any conclusions before they've actually gone on track and had some meaningful testing. But the vibes certainly were pretty good. I was getting good vibes today.
Dave, Bezzecchi said, 4 seasons now in MotoGP? He's not renowned for being a strong starter. I think it's only 1 season where he posted a couple of podiums, but amongst the first half a dozen rounds of each year, he hasn't really shone. It takes a while to get going. That's something he's going to need to reverse.
Yeah, well, the other thing was he said, he was hoping to make a strong start, but a strong start for him was top 5s, maybe a top 3. Whereas by the end of the last season, you were thinking he's got to be on the podium every race. Really, that's where you're expecting to see him. So maybe a strong start is sort of finishing third, fourth, fifth for a while until he really gets really gets going. But what struck me most about Marco Bezzecchi was he just seemed so much more mature. I think he grew enormously last year. This was also something I asked him, and he sort of said he saw it as an opportunity. He realised with Jorge Martin being out, he knew he had to take the sort of the weight of of everything on him, and he used that to grow, to be able to sort of point the factory in the direction that he felt he needed, and to learn a lot. I think he did learn a lot last year, and I think that's really going to stand him in very, very good stead in 2026. He's, like I said, he's absolutely it's one of the riders I'm looking forward to most this year, because if he can carry on where he left off, then he could be a real threat. No one's going to beat Marc Marquez. I think we said this on the last pod, but he can be a real force.
Dave's already planning not to come to many media debriefs, obviously, Neil. But not to be dismissive, I do like Aprilia, the team and the manufacturer. They're a very kind of inclusive brand. They talked a lot about the people power, the group that they have. For me, it was very stark to see Bezzecchi's kind of candor, his demeanor, because this time last year Jorge Martin was the reigning world champion. He was undoubtedly number one in this team, but now they are kind of like a double A side.
You really saw, if you like, in the body language and the group dynamics between Martin and Bezzecchi. Last year when we came here, it was Jorge Martin, the great world champion. He was the number one. He was the leader of the project, and Marco Bezzecchi was there as well. And now it was much more, the weight of the room had shifted a long way towards Marco Bezzecchi. It was much more, not Bezzecchi's team, but he was looking a lot more confident. He was looking a lot more in charge. There was a lot more balance. Martin was looking a lot more sort of tentative and a lot less, not as the swagger had gone out of him. There's a cliche about number one riders and number two riders. Who's number one and who's number two. Last year, you really had the idea that Jorge Martin was number two. Somebody asked Paolo Bonora who was the number one and who's the number two, and Paolo said, "We have two number ones." And it really felt like that. It really felt like both were. It was much more balanced. This is a much more balanced team. It's a team where with two strong riders, both attacking. But once we get to the start of the season, let's see how that carries on.
So what we've heard today from management and also Bezzecchi himself, can this guy really go for it? Can he be a championship challenger? I think Massimo Ribola, when he was asked about this, said, well, we're not aiming for a specific number of wins. We're not aiming to improve the championship position. We're not aiming to fight for the championship. We just want to fight every GP. And there are a couple of races there where Aprilia are going to have to make some gains, such as Sepang. If Bezzecchi's fast in Sepang, Dave, then I know a test is always a little bit of an outlier because of the conditions are usually very favourable. But, Aprilia really could go on.
Yeah, they could, yeah. I'm a little bit cautious about outright declaring that Bezzecchi's going to be fighting for the championship. His success at the end of last season was achieved in Marc Marquez's absence, which I think is a really important thing to keep in mind. We can't get too carried away. There is every chance that Marc could have beaten him quite easily, or at least, beaten him with, a bit of distance between them in Portimao and Valencia, and that really stellar end of season run. But yeah, I really can't think of a time when Aprilia has come into a season looking so strong with two riders that have proven to be top riders in MotoGP, that have proven to be multiple race winners in MotoGP, and with a bike which has a really solid base, and they've continued kind of making little tweaks to. So I think I'm stopping short of saying that Bezzecchi's going to be world champion, but there's every reason to think that he can at least build on what he did last year, maybe win more races, maybe have a bit of a say in the championship up until some point, maybe round 3 or 4, I don't know. But yeah.
Yeah, but I think for sure he's going to make Marc Marquez's life a lot more difficult, because even if Marc Marquez had been there, then maybe Bezzecchi wouldn't have won, but he would have been right there. It would have been a much closer affair all round. So yeah, I think Marc starts as champion, or he starts as favourite, but I think Marco Bezzecchi could be. He's really interesting to see what role he can play.
Second takeaway from this launch, Jorge Martin, we don't quite know where he is in terms of his fitness. That's one of the big questions. I thought he looked a little bit slimmer compared to sort of some of the muscular bulk he had this time last year. But the optimism was there, Dave, and a bizarre also fondness for the motorcycle. I think, did he kiss it twice?
He did kiss it twice. It did look like there were tongues involved. It was extraordinarily affectionate.
I'm happy.
14 years old, wasn't it?
It was very, very 14.
We were in the front row of the presentation as well, Dave.
Yes, that's right.
I mean, like saliva.
I like to give my bike a pat, but I don't. It's all very. It's a lot cleaner than what Jorge Martin was doing. But yeah, no, I mean, like he still has a long way to go. But he is a lot more. I mean, he basically starting again. What we're going to see is this 2026 is going to be the 2025 that should have been, before he smashed himself up. He basically lost a year. He raced for 6 or 7 races, had multiple injuries. He said, I've got to get a feeling for the bike. He really missed that feeling with the bike. That's what he didn't have. He hasn't spent enough time. So I think this is the year that he has to start to adapt and start to, get a feeling with the bike, get an understanding of it. I don't think he's going to be fighting for the championship again. I think he's probably going to be beaten by his teammate again. But this could be the year, if he can stay in one piece, this will be the year where he can really start to get an understanding and show what he can do.
More urgently than that, Neil, he's in a bit of a predicament, isn't he, in terms of timing?
He is, yeah. I mean, he was a little bit tight-lipped on his recovery and just how okay he is. He obviously was still in a pretty bad way when we got to Valencia. And at the end of last year, he made his comeback. He wasn't able to finish the race, but he was really intent on being there for the tests on the Tuesday after the race. And yeah, I think then he was explaining that, the shoulder injury was a lot more complicated than they originally feared it was. And yeah, he still has some way to go, but he was pretty confident that he was going to be 100% fit for Thailand. And yeah, he is in this weird kind of dynamic in that he's saying that he needs to just take it one step at a time, ease himself back into action, don't try and do too much too soon, like he did last year on several occasions. But then that's just not really how MotoGP is, especially in this year when contracts are all up for play and everyone is vying for a seat on the 2027 grid. And Jorge did give an indication that he would like to stay at Aprilia beyond 2026. And Massimo Rivola also hinted that would be his preference. But you know how these things go. And when suddenly someone is touting like X rider has signed for this factory and, this person's going here, it's very tempting to just wind the wick up and attack it at full percent. So it's going to be a really, I think, tricky start to the year for Martin. Just how does he kind of manage it? Because he can't really push beyond what he's capable of, because it showed last year the kind of disastrous consequences that can lie in waiting.
I remember feeling sympathy for Jorge at this event last year because he hadn't had much time to really digest being a MotoGP world champion and achieving his lifetime dream.
He had missed a lot of training. He was doing so much publicity that
Yes.
he wasn't able to train the way he liked. And I wonder whether that was playing on his mind a wee bit going into that first test in Sepang. I mean, we're obviously talking about last year here, but you do wonder, was that maybe a factor in him just trying to attack it a bit too much?
Well, I also felt sympathy again for him here because it was a different kind of Martin, somebody far more kind of battered, if you like, in terms of what he'd been through.
A bit more humble.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
A bit more humility. That was exactly the word I was going to use.
But then, Dave, I'd say, this time last year, Aprilia were extremely lucky to have Jorge Martin as the world champion. But the situation is kind of reversed now because you feel that Jorge Martin you feel very lucky to stay in Aprilia.
Exactly. That's a perfect way of putting it. It really is. Last year, Aprilia felt lucky to have Jorge Martin. This year, Jorge Martin is lucky to have Aprilia. Also because the bike is so much better than it was last year, and that they're willing to show the sort of the patience. And I also think, they also bought Aprilia basically bought Jorge Martin at the top of his market value. His market value, because of everything that's happened, will have sort of dropped off enormously. So I think he's going to be available for sort of a lot less money. We did hear from Massimo Rivola that other factories are already sniffing around there. Well, he said our riders. He didn't say which ones.
Yeah, that's the third kind of takeaway really from today, is the sense of the future and how it's kind of eating into this season already, not just in terms of the silly season, which Martin kind of made light of, but then also the 850, in which technical director Fabiano Sterlachini was talking about. First of all, I mean, from what the management were telling us, like you were saying, Dave, finish your statement, because it does seem that the Aprilia's guys are sort of very much in demand.
They are very much in demand, precisely because of what they managed to show this year.
Last year.
Or last year, yeah, exactly. I keep forgetting what year I am, or what decade I'm in. But not only that, but also the other way around. Aprilia is in demand as well, because it's a more competitive bike, and contract negotiations always go two ways. Riders want to be on bikes, and factories want to have riders, but a rider wants to be on a bike that can win. They'll ride for a bit less if they've got a better bike. So it's going to be a funny little balancing act between the two to see how that plays out. We do know that particularly Honda are out there with wads of cash, waving them under riders' noses, trying to tempt them away. Ducati, that isn't how they function. I would suspect that Yamaha will be doing something similar, because they need someone good, despite having Toprak. If Toprak Razgatlioglu develops the way that everyone hopes he does, then maybe they just stick him straight into the factory team. But they've still got to find someone. So yeah, it's very interesting. There doesn't seem to be a shape to silly season yet, sort of thing. Just that it's there, boiling away underneath the surface. It's what everyone is going to be talking about and thinking about, and it's going to put a lot of pressure on riders to perform early on in the season.
And Rivola didn't say they were in a rush, really, did he? I mean, he wasn't saying, right, we want to get this all done before Thailand.
I mean, he said he would like to take his time, but the reality of the situation might dictate otherwise. I mean, silly season in previous times. I mean, Jorge Lorenzo was signed up before the end of the first round of the season in 2016 for the following year. So, there is precedent that it gets started very early. I mean, we've heard rumors, I think we mentioned on our last week's show, that Pedro Acosta is already signed to go somewhere other than KTM. So, yeah, maybe there will be. By the time we get to Sepang, maybe a little bit more will become clear.
Marco Bezzecchi was saying that he's been lucky in his MotoGP career so far, because he hasn't really felt that tier 1, tier 2 status that you get within a team. If anything, he came closest to it last year when Martin was a clear number 1 as world champion. But I think also, full props to Bezzecchi's management, because they slotted him into Aprilia just at the right time. He performed, so all the merit that he has, he completely deserves. But he's in a prime position to be able to sit around a table and say, right, can you put another 0 on, please?
Yeah, so much of a MotoGP rider's career, or even a motorcycle racer's career, is about timing. It's about being in the right place at the right time. To an extent, for example, Manu Gonzalez is an example of this. He could have had, one of the reasons he was held off from getting a MotoGP ride was because he had the wrong passport. And now, because of what happened at the end of the Moto2 season, he'll be much less in demand. You just have to make the right decision at the right point, at the right time. I think it's an excellent point about Bezzecchi. His management put him on the right bike at the right time. He really managed to develop. He's going to be a much more attractive prospect. He'll have much better, much more leverage with Aprilia this year. It's definitely in Aprilia's interest for him to stay. Because the other question is, as a rider, who do you choose? Because we are changing bikes. Will the fact that Ducati is the best bike at the moment, probably, does that mean they'll automatically be the best bike? The Aprilia is good. Will it also be good later next year? And Fabio Stellacchini said, well, we think that what we've got here is a good basis. We think that, if we're doing the things right now, that process, that development process, that work process is going to be extremely useful in 2027. It means we're going to have a really solid foundation for next year's bike, despite the changes in technical rules.
And Rivola was also being quite cautious about the tyres. I think Ducati would have good reason for feeling quite confident about their knowledge of Pirellis and what they've achieved in World Superbike. But Aprilia, of course, may be lacking a little bit in terms of that knowledge there. But where there's the future, there's also the present, of course. And Steracchini was saying that the 2026 RSGP, they focus mainly on aerodynamics, which I think we saw from the bike today, which had some rollover from what they introduced at the Valencia test. And electronics and aero were the two main areas, but then the 850 is coming along. I mean, it's on the dyno, and he said it'll be by spring.
Early spring, early
so
spring.
April probably. We'll see the 850 on track. I mean, he said the 850 is pretty much good to go, but they're doing tests in the factory, just making sure that everything is kind of up to spec, and they can do kind of endurance tests and things like that, so it won't be breaking down whenever they do introduce it onto the track. But it is up and running on the dyno, the engine, and that we will see it. So I guess that puts them a little bit behind the likes of Honda, which we believe have already been testing
and KTM.
And KTM, who had their engine on the dyno, October last year.
Polo Spogo was running laps in Jerez as well.
I think recently. Honda were running laps with their 850 before the end of last year as well.
Yeah, that's a pang.
So so probably maybe a little bit in delay with that. But with regards to this year, I mean, we previously mentioned it's a good base, it's a solid base that they have. Looking at the last couple of races last year, it seemed like it was maybe the best bike on the grid, certainly given the Ducati a run for its money. As you said, quite different aero that we saw on the bikes that were presented here today, with the aero that they were running in the races last year. Certainly at the front, along the sides, the seat unit was a bit different as well. It sounds like those are the two areas, electronics and aero that they've been working on over the winter.
Dave, if you had to put your €10 on the table, would you say that Aprilia get even more radical with the aero, or is just the priorities not there?
No, I mean, aero is difficult. This is another thing that Stella Keeney was telling me in the interview, which will be on our Patreon, that a motorbike is like an orchestra. And so when all of the parts have to play together. So if you change one thing, then that affects everything else. So, if you have more front downforce, then that affects also the rear of the bike. You have to go and compensate. So you're always, it's never perfect. You're always sort of sacrificing one area to make a gain somewhere else. I don't think we're going to see, it is going to change next year because 850s, much less horsepower, and so you're not going to need the same amount of downforce, and that's going to change acceleration. It's going to change the wheelie phase. It's going to change the braking phase. It's going to change so much. I don't think we're going to see a lot of changes. Just looking at I had a proper ogle of the aero. It's very similar to what was used at the Valencia test last year. I don't think it's identical. I think some of I think they've changed one or two bits on the wing, on the nose wing, and also the side fairing down the bottom is a little bit different as well. We've seen they've changed to this different tail wing, which they tested out. But I don't think we're going to see a great deal of it. Also, they're going to have to balance their 2026 effort with their 2027 development effort. It's a lot of work for all of the factories.
Well, like you were saying earlier, I mean, a rising tide lifts all ships, and that means the Trackhouse Racing saddle is also going to be a bit more desirable, particularly after Ralph Fernandez's success in Phillip Island last year. And of course, the fact that Bonaro was saying that Aprilia are taking 8 RSGPs to Sepang. So those bikes are really making progress. And I don't know, overall, I just enjoyed this launch. I thought it was quite compact, succinct. It sort of rushed by. There was different personalities involved. Not one person was monologuing for too long. It was pretty enjoyable.
Yeah, it was a decent launch. Yeah, absolutely. There was maybe a launch at the start of this week, which you couldn't say that about. But this one, certainly kind of ticked by with the right level of intensity, I felt. One or two things maybe just to bring up before we finish. Massimo Rivola was asked quite a bit about the changes ongoing in MotoGP, obviously new ownership, the direction that we're going in. He was just saying, it's another year where Aprilia haven't been able to attract a proper title sponsor, which you would think, considering the results that they were having last year, clearly the second best manufacturer, 4 race wins in the tail end of last year. I mean, still not able to kind of bring a sponsor to the table, and he was thanking the Piaggio group for kind of making up for the fact that they don't have that. They're not able to bring in 5-6 million from a title sponsor that maybe one or two others are. So that it's surprising, also maybe a little concerning, I would say.
I don't know, because it's only like 4 months ago. I mean, that's quite a short time frame to suddenly confirm a major sponsor and a major influx of cash, because companies' budgets tend to work far in advance. I'd say they're probably better talking now for the following racing season based on what they did in 2025. But because MotoGP is in such transition over the next 18 months, it's going to be hard to really sort of slap any significant logo on. The Italian was mentioning the fact that Aprilia don't really have sponsors, they have partners. And it seems to imply that sponsorship these days is more of a partnership and it's more of a dynamic association. It's not just a case of there's my brand going around the track and it's on TV for X amount of minutes. There has to be more kind of integration into what a company brings to a sport. So it's kind of interesting listening to that.
Yeah, I mean, we're living in a very, very changed media landscape. You know, it's not just, well, my as you say, my logo is on TV. It used to be very simple, though. There was software that would calculate exactly how many minutes and how prominently your logo was on screen. But it's much less about that now. It's much more about business and opportunities. It's about bringing people together. It's about exposure through all sorts of social media channels. There's so many different things. I mean, we're hearing from, for example, Ducati. There's going to be a lot more influencers there than there were in previous years, and fewer journalists. So the emphasis
at their launch,
yeah, exactly, and that is going to be much more interesting in terms of exposure, of just sheer exposure. So yeah, things are changing a lot. Also, I do think sometimes it can be smart to not sign up a title sponsor for less money rather than holding out and going more, because you just end up, basically tanking the market for everyone. No one wants it. No one wants it. But everyone is waiting to see what happens with Liberty. Again, Massimo Rivola spoke a bit about what they're expecting, using the riders as the ambassadors of the sport, of the ambassadors of the product MotoGP, really, and having to sell it more.
I thought Marco Bezzecchi was fantastically neutral about being an ambassador of MotoGP and doing more media duties, neither one way or the other. So full credit to him. Okay, well, we've got shuttles and flights to get. Pre-season is in full roll. Ducati coming up next, of course, in Madonna di Campiglio. And we'll be bringing you some more content, of course, through Patreon, as well as the regular podcast channel. We hope you enjoyed this little wrap-up from Milan.